Today on the show, strategy plus action equals building a sales system that's still human. Great coaches and consultants like you have the ability to change people's lives and transform entire organizations. And your impact can often go far beyond the clients you work with. One of the reasons I love working with coaches and consultants is because of that ripple effect. This show is here to highlight your expertise and empower you with resources and new ideas to grow your business. Welcome to Strategy in Action. John Small Mountain Hill is on the show today. He's back for a second appearance on the show. He's got this fantastic book, Selling from Scratch, and really wanted to dig in on a couple of areas here. And the biggest one, honestly, is combining the idea of process, system, having all these things in place when you're selling. And honestly, we get into marketing and all of that as well, but having those systems and processes in place and still being human, right? And what I love about this interview too is that if you're watching, you'll notice, about halfway through this second half that we did, because one thing that I just love about John is that he really wants to give as much value as possible. It's how he runs his groups, his trainings, his consultings, everything. And, when we did sort of round one of this interview and really digging into that idea of, being human in this process, we just didn't quite nail it, in terms of that juicy answer, that, how he, is intentional with that, with his clients. And so we jumped in for the second part. I'm so glad we did. We ended up just having a fantastic in-depth conversation around this whole idea. And I know you're going to love it. Let's jump in. John Hill, welcome to the show again.
Thank you so much for having me back for part two, man. This is awesome. I'm very excited to be here.
I really wanted to have you on today for a very specific topic, and it's inspired, honestly, by not just you and who you are, but it kind of came to fruition reading your book, Selling from Scratch. Everyone on Amazon and Audible, go out right now and purchase. I'll plug for you. See,
thank you. I appreciate that.
We'll just insert those throughout the episode. Well, in my book, Selling from Scratch, which is available on Amazon and Audible right now, you can answer every question that way. That'll be awesome. So I love this idea that, we need a selling process if we're going to do this thing called business the right way, right? A lot of times, certainly in the beginning, we, spray and pray and, have a call and, hey, I sold something and then I didn't and I don't know. Once we buy into that aspect that, okay, we need a process for this, I think very often the pendulum swings too far the other way then, and everything that did kind of work here and there in terms of just being a human and having those conversations kind of gets thrown out the window, and we go into this process mode and everything equals data and step 14 and automation and all of that. And what I love with the book, and really that's what I've always seen from you since I've known you and we've had these conversations, is you do this phenomenal job of putting the processes into place and still being human. And so let's dig into that a little bit. And what, I guess from the beginning, not to be too trite, but where was that discovery? When did that click for you that really you could kind of not only could have, but should have both those things in place?
Oh, man. So I'm a very routine-driven person, right? It comes from my personality. And then I was in the military. And in the military, you have a process for everything, right? It's called an SOP, Standard Operating Procedure. And I loved that. Like, it made my life so much easier because I'd worked in jobs, I'd done things, and I often felt like I didn't have enough to really feel comfortable doing something. The Army was the answer to that. They're going to show you everything. They're going to hold you to a ridiculously high standard. The rest is on you, right? And that worked for me. Like, show me the method, show me the manner, show me the mechanism. And so when I got home from the military and I found Kung Fu, my Kung Fu teacher is a special operations Army veteran as well. So he was very much about process and repeatability and everything. And once again, it just kind of lined up. And we had this rule way back in the day when I was in high school. I was a skateboarder in high school, and we had this rule whenever we were skating. If you landed a trick once, congratulations, you got lucky. If you landed it twice, you're getting better. If you could land that trick 3 times in a row, you actually had it. You actually owned it, right? And I love that because, once again, I'm a very rigid person just by default. And so the idea of what is the outcome that we're looking for? Great. What does it need to look like to have that outcome more often than not, right? Process is a very weird word for lots of people, and they don't really like it because it sounds very institutional, it sounds very sterile, and I get it. But think of it like a recipe. I don't cook myself, but I love to watch cooking shows because you're following a process. You're following a set of instructions. And I saw this one interview once, and it was talking about before any one of these celebrity chefs comes out with a new cookbook, they run it through the test kitchen, right? Every recipe and that they put out goes through a testing process. Can average people follow this recipe and get to the same result? I dig that. I love that, right? And so all of these things just started to kind of coalesce for me and be very thoughtful and very interesting. And being an introvert, I don't want to just go out and hang around and just be in front of people all the time. It saps my battery. It makes me very tired. It's not who I was. And that was almost the thing that ran me out of sales because I was in a B2B role. I was selling medical devices and I didn't have a process. It was just be great in the moment, be around, make it happen. That was essentially all the new hire training I got my first day in that role. And it just made me terrified. Oh, what? Just hang around? Make it happen? Make what happen? So it just wasn't enough. I couldn't see a path forward from there. So then I started working with a sales coach who was all about process and repeatability and stuff. And how can you do more with less effort? Which was awesome because that was something my Kung Fu teacher talked about all the time, right? I'd finally land a technique and he'd walk by and he'd be like, hey, good job. Could you do that 100 times? No, Sifu, I couldn't. He goes, you should be able to figure out a way to do it with less energy. And then he would just walk away, and like you go through that moment of like, how am I ever going to get there to, okay, maybe I should relax here. Maybe I should try this, and you get to the point to where you can do stuff with multiple reps with minimal effort. And so that's what selling should be. It shouldn't be this thing that you have to whip your team up into rabid like ferocity so that they'll go out and they'll do their jobs. And, not all salespeople are savages and these killers and in these very interesting ways of talking to salespeople. Some people just want to go out and help people. And how can you help people without it being an all-consuming thing, especially if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a creative, if you're not a sales type, but you need to sell because it's part of what you're doing, right? Freelancers, agency people, creative types. These are people who don't want a sales label at all. But if they don't know about this stuff, they're leaving opportunities on the table. They're being misheard. They're getting taken advantage of. And those are the people that we work with now, right? Marketing, creative people who don't want a sales label whatsoever, but they've got goals. They want to do big things. And how do they get there? So process is your way to get there.
Yeah, and that's a great point too that you bring up. It's like that idea of, do this thing, like figure out that process and practice it, right? And do it 100 times so that then you get like that's just that's process. That's just like in your memorization in terms of not necessarily what you're saying, but just that process. Okay, we're at this stage of the process. We're at this stage, and then you can let the human come out, right? Then
absolutely
you get out of the just like any kind of scripting, any kind of we're in this stage, because it's just of course we're doing that because you've gotten great at it, and now you can really listen, really take in what the other person is saying, and maybe go off on a little tangent, but know where to bring it back, but really dig in, and instead of glossing over something that other person has just said that may be deep and meaningful to them.
Oh yeah,
instead of just like, okay, well, now we're on to step 3 of the process. Next question,
Yeah.
and it sounds ridiculous, but when you're in that and if you're just going by the script, we've certainly been on the receiving end of those
Absolutely.
things.
Yeah.
And instead, you dig in, and those are those connection points. And it's great you're working with that group of folks, because I would say I fall into that group of, man, I don't want to process or data or any of that,
Yeah.
but
I can just show up. It's going to be awesome, right? People like me. It's going to be fine.
yeah, it's that thing. And then, yeah, of course, what are my results? I don't know. Kind of this week it was cool. That week it was nah. And so I know the value, right? And that's what I think that's why what we're talking about today, because it resonated so much with me, of just like, you can do both these things,
Yeah.
Yeah. And that gets into what you help people too. And part of that coaching is like the practice stuff,
Yeah.
and hearing that back. And when you can make that this thing over here that you're selling, and not yourself and getting wrapped up in that, but this is just the process, that's so valuable.
Yeah. Like, do you really own it? Do you really know it? Is it part of you? Right. And what's really fascinating is people have got these processes that come from doing lots of things over and over and over again. But if you don't build it with intention as you're going through it, we get to this place called unconscious competence. We do it just automatically. You would be able to walk into any room and figure out, okay, the lighting needs to be here, the camera needs to be here, this is going to be the best source of like natural light and everything else like that. And other people without that skill set would be like, where do we start? Right? So you have got process in your head, right? We all have process in our head around certain things. We put our shoes on before we go outside. It'd be a little bit silly to go outside and then put your shoes on, but sometimes it happens. So it's okay sometimes. But the default is what? What does the default look like? And the way that I approach the problem is that, coming from the military mindset and doing martial arts and being a professional poker player, we are in these little moments of emotion, right? And emotion shuts down our high level thinking, right? You can't be strategic when you're under the emotional mantle. This is called the fog of war in the military. It's called the emotional moment and other things. And if you're talking to a prospect and they say, why should I buy from you? You're going to have a little bit of moment of, well, what do I say? Right? And people lean into features and benefits. And it's not the right answer. Because the right answer is, man, I don't really know that you even need what I do yet. Would it make sense to have a conversation and talk about it? And if you can't do that, answer with that kind of quality of relaxation and okay in a practice, you're not going to be able to do it in front of your prospect.
Exactly. And sheer confidence, like that comes from that confidence, that knowing, that starts from knowing what you do have for the right person is perfect and amazing and gets great results. Like, that's your foundation, right?
Yes.
And now we can go, if we just, even if you have to stick it up on a wall somewhere in front of you, like keeping that as a reminder to help you in those times that you just talked about, those fog of war times when it is an emotional hit, right? Because we're used to that. We're used to just answer the question, and taking that step back and, man, that's a great question. I don't know yet. You mind if I ask you a couple of questions?
Yeah. I talk to people and dealing with these sets of problems. We've been able to help with those problems. Can we talk and see if those problems are on your radar? Because if not, I'm glad to go. Because it means you're probably not dealing with something that I can help with, or maybe you're not aware of it, in which case I'm going to have to sell it to you, which I really don't want to do. So let's see if you're aware of these issues that other people come talk to me about. And if there are things you're aware of and you're dealing with them and you want to talk about them, totally okay. But I'm not here to sell you anything. If anything, I'm here to make sure that you get helped by the right person. And if that person isn't me, I really don't want your money. I just want to find out who that right person is. Because if you need Grant Cardone, you're not going to like my stuff. If you want Dan Locke, you're not going to like my stuff. If you want that hard edge stuff, don't buy from me. Like, maybe read the book and look at a different way. Go take a look at the podcast. Don't buy coaching from me. I don't need your revenue. I don't want your revenue. I'd rather work with clients who want it the way that we do it. And that is the same thing that we're talking about here. Put that on your wall. Figure out who that group of people is that only you can help. And that provides a lot of clarity. And it also removes a lot of the kind of confusion and avoidance around outreach and prospecting, because you finally are clear on, everyone thinks it's like this big of a bucket. It's probably this big of a bucket, like much smaller in the grand scheme of things. But focus on people, on finding people who are in that bucket, and stop trying to sell to people outside of that bucket. And your life is so much easier. So much easier.
And I know it's easier said than done, right? I know,
Sure.
I know when, rent's due tomorrow and you really want to make this sale. I get it.
Yeah.
I know you and I both get it, right? But there's no way around it, right? Because if you manage to pull that sale off, you'll just regret it, and you're going to be throwing away however many other clients because you're so wrapped up and in this bad client that you've gotten. Bad for you. They may be great people and they just need something else. When you can truly operate from that space, it's life changing, right? And I want to talk about this process aspect too of, do you, and it sounds ridiculous because, the whole thing maybe sounds ridiculous to either side, right? Like you can't be human and have this process, or you can't, vice versa. But do you kind of build it in a sense of, like, when you build out your sales process, maybe not in this way, but have this part where, at this stage of the conversation, I'm going to ask about this, or I'm going to be open to this, or listen to. Do you kind of, for lack of a better phrase, build the humanity into the process a little bit?
That's the way that I approach the problem, right? Like, my personality, and I talk about this a lot in the book, is I'm a C personality on disc, which means that I'm very similar to, like, Spock on Star Trek, right? Vulcans, no emotion. That doesn't make sense. That is often how I am. And the more stressed out I get, the more emotional I get, the more that drops away. The more I just turn into, what is the next task on my task list? What is the next thing? Like, what is the next thing? But I lose my empathy. I lose my creativity when I'm stressed out. And I didn't realize for a long time how stressed out I was, because I had no access to creativity. I had no access to empathy. I was just following these steps, like, nose to the grindstone. And this is where many sellers are at right now, because they're in that spot of, like, how am I going to make rent? Can I keep my job? Especially right now with all these layoffs going on. It's very hard to be strategic when you're seeing the biggest, most profitable companies in the world laying off hundreds or thousands of people. Like, what does that mean for the rest of us? So
John Hill, welcome to this kind of second part to our episode. Thanks for jumping in with me.
Of course. We were chatting after the last recording, and I realized I might have inadvertently sidestepped a couple of the questions you were really looking for depth on. So wanted to make sure you were happy with the episode, and we had a good conversation to set to hop back in. So thank you. It's important to me that if someone asks a question I have an answer for it, that I give an answer for it. Huge pet peeve whenever I see someone talking about their stuff and they don't actually give actionable advice. So thank you for having me on again.
Oh man, I appreciate the reach out, and I wanted to share this part of it as well. And you had that great idea of, like, hey, let's discuss this aspect of what this, two-part is all about, because what happened was really, around this question of, how do you help people with the humanness of the sales process, and combining those two often seemingly different things, continuing to be human in this, but it's a process. You do this, you do this, you do this. And just circumstances that day, right? Like, the answers were good. They're fine. I got off the call thinking, like, maybe I didn't ask the right way, but we were also constrained by time. Like, we have to end at this time. We have to get up. So I was ecstatic, actually, that you reached out and we're like, I don't feel like, we quite got it. And then, which is why I love you so much, man. Like, that integrity and that's what's in every interaction. It's in your book. It's in everything that I've ever experienced, with you, is that caring about that. And that's huge. But the second part to all that, though, is then when you explain, like, here's what I tell folks, I was just like, yes, that has to be on the show. If there was still not a better answer, then we wouldn't be doing this recording. Yeah. But the answer's there. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to dig into it. So let's dig into it even more
Awesome.
of that, and really, several of those frameworks that you shared, even on LinkedIn with me after the first interview. It's just so valuable. So let's dig into that around the humanness of a
Yeah.
sales process, and how do you help folks with that?
You hit the nail on the head around the idea that the process and being human in the process sometimes are kind of at ends with each other, right? Because a process is supposed to be a very sterile series of actions you take to get to a desired outcome. But there is a way of going through that as a human, and a way of just doing it not with a human element. And I spent a lot of time being the person who was trying to go through it without the human side of it, and decided things are just easier when you lean into this. It's better for everybody involved. Don't be such a robot, John. Figure out how the humans think. And so essentially, on the marketing side of this stuff, you have to go talk to the people. And that sounds like a very kind of silly idea, but you look at these marketing teams and it's a bunch of very smart people who all look and sound the same, and they're strategizing what they're going to be talking about, how they're going to get people to buy, how their people are going to build communities, all these things. And no one is talking to anyone who actually represents that group of people. So you're going to be wrong more than you're right. And when I was a poker player, whenever I came into it, I had a coach, and he taught me some amazing things that I still use today. And one of the things that he talked about was, if you try to put someone on one hand, they've only got one hand, you're going to be wrong way more than you're right. So think about a range of hands that makes sense. And that, I still think about this constantly, right? Because I think when we're thinking about avatars and ICPs and stuff, we get so narrowed down, and our actual usage of these things is so blown out. There's a mismatch there in how we're thinking through the process, right? So we have to think about a range of things for these people that we want to talk to. And you have to go talk to them. What does that mean for you? If you can't do this, what happens, right? If it costs this much, would you pay for it? What does it need to do? How would you justify this? This is what makes marketing really good, because marketing is about the assumptions you make of the audience you're trying to sell to. So if those assumptions are wrong, it's just going to be expensive. Your campaigns are going to fail. Your sales team are following up and chasing people who don't want it. No one can really figure it out. And you have leadership who are often so disconnected from the sales actions, the marketing actions, they don't know how to fix it either. It's fixed by talking to these people in the audience deeply, having relationships with them, build a network of people in this group if you really want a shot at selling to them over the long term.
Yeah, and I really wanted to jump in with that, because yes, 100 times yes, but how, right? Because I think we get caught up in the, I'd be happy to talk to anybody all day long. What is that? How does that come about? And how do you come across, even with hey, I'm doing some research, and not just sound like another BS pitch of somebody who says they're doing research, but they're just trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
How do you recommend that people go through that process?
Everybody wants to talk about something, is something that I think about all the time, right? I think about, if you're networking, if you're in a sales conversation, no matter what it is, if you're talking to someone else, there's something that they want to talk about. And if you pull that string the right way, it's game over, right? If you talk to a parent, you talk about their kids, game over. You talk to an entrepreneur about their business, game over. You won't be able to get them to shut up, right? So how do you find that string, and what do they want to talk about? So right now I'm doing this project for one of my clients. They were a custom development shop, and now they have really focused in on some work that they really like doing. It's API integrations. So great, I'm going to talk to the people. What are the struggles with API integrations? How did this impact deal flow, deal velocity, and everything else? And so I'm doing reach outs to sales engineers, because it's a role I'm not super familiar with. It's in my realm of things that I'm very interested in, selling and engineering. And we'll uncover some stuff. So I'm doing reach outs. I'm having conversations and meetings with these people to really understand what their life is like, where they struggle. And so that way, hopefully, we have a better shot at partnering with these people to really help them get more done.
Right? How are you framing those reach outs, though, that's been effective?
So in this situation, it's fairly simple, because I have some authority built around the sales role, right? I think it would be a lot harder if I wasn't a sales author who's been in this game for a while and has got a pretty big network. But right now, I'm just reaching out and saying, hey, I would love to hear more about how your company uses the sales engineer role, the nuances to it, because every sales role is a little bit different. I would love to hear what this role looks like. And so I'm doing my reach outs. People are responding yes. We'll have some conversations. I'm going to go ask all my annoying John questions, which people like when they're sales conversations, but no one likes when it's like early stage discovery, because I just ask stupid questions until it makes sense. But it's just about that ask. But it's an ask that makes sense. Sales engineering is a role that most people don't even know exists, right? So if I can do a good job of talking to those people, highlighting those roles, helping other people who might want to be on that role, I'm providing value to my client in the form of good recurring conversations, good potential partnerships. I'm also helping hopefully a group of people that might think that they want to be a sales engineer, but they don't know how to get into it or what that role is going to entail. Is it really going to be a good fit for them? So in that kind of thing, I know I'm providing value. So if someone doesn't want to meet with me, totally fine. I'm not trying to get 100% acceptance. I'm trying to get
Sure.
majority acceptance.
Yeah, and I think for me, even with, I mean, you know me, I'll talk to anybody, right? Like, but even with that, I have that. I sit back and I'm like, man, so I need to talk to, experienced coaches and consultants. I need to understand better what they really want, what their pain point really is.
Yeah.
I frame that at times, with, I use the show for that or something else. But I still have this sort of like hang up that I need to go that route instead of just asking, because I don't want to come across as one of those folks. Yeah, I'm researching this thing. And then, it turns into a sales deal.
So the line in the book says that sales is noble. Right. And I do believe that line. And I add on to it whenever I'm talking about this with a person. It's noble when you are. Okay. So right now, I'm just reaching out to these people to learn more about the roles. If deals come from it because there's partnership opportunities there, perfect. That's not what I'm going after. I know that if I talk to, 15, 25, 100 of these people, I will find trends that other people won't, because it's how I think. I know that we'll be able to put together some content that will feature these people well for their time and also help others that are on this path. So that leads to some confidence in doing these reach outs. And, and some people are like, well, let's tap the brakes. I'm like, cool. Yeah, happy to tap the brakes. Like, I get it. I don't hop into every Zoom call that everyone asks me for. So I get that I need to earn this a little bit, but hopefully I can interview you and we can have a good conversation, because I'm trying to put this role on the map for other people. That's noble work, in my opinion. Now, if I was just going to use these calls as like well, do you think there's room for us to partner? And I wasn't really interested in the role and turning the nuggets into content and stuff like that, then yeah, I would have head trash around it. I would be avoidant. I wouldn't want to do it. It'd be the last thing on my to-do list, and it would be the thing that I would be constantly procrastinating on. But since I know that this is going to be helpful in multiple ways, I'm excited to do reach outs. I'm excited whenever people say like, hey, I'm super swamped. I can't do this right now. Thank you so much for letting me know. I appreciate that. Like, that's one of the things about being a human. Say thank you when you get a no, because you know how easy it is to just lie and stall a salesperson?
Oh, yeah.
Too easy. Right? Too easy. Like my old business partner said, you can lie to a salesperson and still go to church on Sunday. It's true, right? So, you're never going to get 100% acceptance on any kind of outreach. You could offer cars to people and someone would still be like, well, I'm a little concerned, right? Like, this feels like a tactic or a gimmick, and it's like, okay, cool. That would be a tactic or a gimmick, but this is just meant to help you, other people on the path and stuff like that. And when your outreach is really focused around that, the avoidance of prospecting goes away.
Yeah.
Right.
That intention is everything. Yeah.
Some people still are reluctant to prospect and do outreach because they're not really clear on who they can help. And I hated this line for forever when I was like first starting getting into sales. I'm like, oh, that's just nonsense and BS. But man, that is something I was frustrated about, because I was selling things I didn't believe in. Now that I believe in this thing, and I fundamentally think that most people need it and it can help you, get out of the way. I don't have a problem doing outreach or prospecting anymore because I know how important this is. And if I don't reach out to someone who's like in my target realm of like a creative or like a freelancer or someone who doesn't want to be a salesperson but has to now, I'm the only person who's going to help you without trying to make you try to be like a Cardone type. So
Yeah.
if I don't do outreach to those people, I'm making it okay for them to work with someone who's not a good fit for them. And I can't stand that. Can't do it.
That's strong. That's great. All right. So you're out there, you're talking. That's a huge part of this. So you actually understand what things are going on the marketing side,
Yes.
leading into sales side. So that's one big step in this being human part. What's
Yeah.
next?
So sales side, there is a way of running your conversations to just get your needs met. And that's using every tactic, every trick, every gimmick you can possibly think of. It's being very short-term focused in how you're approaching the conversation and what like a meaningful at bat is. And then the way that we approach it, this is why my community is called the Sherpa community. Most people don't need a salesperson, they need a guide. And the difference between these two things is with a guide, you can actually tell them, hey, about halfway up the mountain, I'm concerned because the air might not be thick enough to breathe, right? The Sherpa is going to say, oh, we have oxygen for that, versus the salesperson who says, you'll be fine, don't worry about it, kind of deal. They're allowed to have a concern. They're allowed to bring it up. Don't treat them like an idiot for bringing up a concern, Right.
And so you just got to push through. You just got to, you got to work.
Do you not want it bad enough? Like that's absurd. So Sherpa is a mindset methodology that I teach people, and it's kind of it's the core of everything I do. Every conversation I have, every person I work with, every person I coach and teach, anyone who joins my team. And Sherpa stands for being skeptical of ourself and what we're hearing. Don't just jump at the first thing that sounds like an opportunity. Ask some additional questions. Be helpful. If they need something similar to you, but it's not you, help them out by referring them in the actual right direction, as opposed to putting a bunch of pressure on yourself and your team, especially if you're like on the agency side of things where alignment is so crucial. Help them meaningfully, even if it means not with you. E is empathetic. This is the hardest thing for me because I'm a bit of a robot when I start thinking about stuff. And I really have to force myself to slow down and be empathetic about what other people are going through. That person who ghosted you probably isn't an evil person who just likes to go salesperson or salespeople. Maybe they were busy. Maybe it was a holiday last week. Maybe anything else could have happened. So don't start with just thinking that they're evil, that they're wasting your time. That's jaded thinking. Accidents happen. The R in Sherpa means resolute. You have to know what works for you. And as opposed to trying to chase everything around, right? You have to be unwavering. If someone, for me personally, I don't like a lot of chaos in my day. I'm very structured and planned for my day. And sometimes I'll get people like, yeah, bro, call me right now. We can have a conversation. Nope, sorry, that's not how I work. But you're a sales guy. You're supposed to want to hop on the phone and chat. Nope, I do scheduled calls because that gives us the room to make sure that we can dive deeply, figure out if there's something here. I'm not just going to call you on a whim because I don't want that. So I'm going to lose some deals for that, but that's okay because I know my best clients don't have a problem with that. I also lose deals sometimes because I move slower than they move. That's tied to my personality. It's tied to failing meaningfully on some of these projects in the past and knowing that we have to have a good foundation for anything to work well, right?
Oh yeah. So and also you're not only not showing up as your best self on that spur of the moment call.
Yes.
What does that do the next 4 calls, right?
Absolutely.
That you do have.
Yeah. So resolute, know what you're good at, know what you're not, know what leads you to business, know what doesn't, understand what's a shiny thing and what's an actual business activity that moves you further down the road. Be resolute about it. And be ruthlessly critical because people mean well, but people will take your time without thinking that they're really doing anything bad. You have to manage your own time because no one else is going to do it for you. The P in Sherpa stands for practiced, right? This is the part that I think most people miss. Been in the military. I spent 15 years as a martial artist. You do not get better by reading about it. Promise. You're going to get to hear, And then everything past this, you're never going to know because you've not done it. That goes for like your marketing avatar workshops. That goes for like running a marketing campaign, learning how to like use a frame on a sales call, looking over a script as opposed to like actually using a script, having a framework that you own in your conversations. You have to be practiced because the chaos that is two humans having a real good conversation, you're not going to wing it well. Nobody does. So be practiced. You shouldn't be practicing on your prospects. We have practice space, and you can practice with good practice partners and make you better. Why? Like, it's crazy to me. And the last part is accepting, right? And this is something lots of salespeople struggle with. Not all deals are going to close. Not all deals are supposed to close. The deals that you're trying so hard to force to close are because you started to hope, you started to get excited, right? And we have to go back and look at the S. Why are you so hopeful? Why aren't you more skeptical? What did you miss? Right? And we see salespeople, man, I thought this deal was going to close. I did this thing because the deal was going to close. Well, it didn't. So maybe do that thing later, or maybe don't do it as part of your process. Maybe don't do it in the hopes that it's going to bring you business. It's either part of your process or it's not, and you're hoping. We have to zoom out as sellers and entrepreneurs around the idea that not all deals are going to close. That's what's supposed to happen. Most of them are not supposed to close, actually, right? And depending upon your business type, the more you force fits, the more detrimental it is to your team and your ability to grow and to stay in business, rowing in the right direction with the rest of your team.
Yeah, big time. And I love this sort of framework for folks, and I know there's more, around this. This is like what runs through the thread of everything you teach, which I like, because it starts to. It's a process in and of itself. It's a checklist in and of itself a little bit, but at the same time, each one of those things is very human. It speaks to how you need to react as a human who is going to interact with other humans, right?
Other humans, yeah.
And that's the thing too, is it's almost a process for that. It's these little reminders for that, which to folks who don't have a problem, hey, what's up, everybody, at all, it may seem strange because like, oh, I don't know how to talk to people. Don't worry about it. But how many of these things do we miss because we aren't intentional with like, oh, I want to make sure that other person feels this way or knows my boundaries or it's still so important to have those things in front of us and little reminders. And yeah, you may be able to be a certain way, naturally, easily, whatever, but are you that way every time? Are you that way no matter what just happened on the call before, and on and on, and having those checklists like, oh, that's right, I need to focus on this, and this. I like that structure.
Yeah. One of my Kung Fu brothers, he's now a full-time Kung Fu instructor. And we were talking about this a super long time ago. We were talking about this idea that people think that they're going to rise to the occasion, right? Especially like in fighting. If I just get mad enough, people think that they're going to turn into the Incredible Hulk, right? And that they're going to be able to Hulk out and smash and just run over everything. And people feel the same way about sales conversations, right? Because in my conversations with people, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, where do you think the breakdown is? Well, John, I just need more of the right leads, is what people tell me. I'm like, oh, okay, perfect. What does right look like? Well, no, I don't, because it's your business. So, but for lots of people, the right fit means that they say yes at the end of it. There's no other categorying or buckets or trends or anything else that like leads to them being in a group of the right people, but saying yes means that they're the right fit. That is such flawed thinking. That's going to get you in such huge trouble with like your client base and your team and all these other issues. But so he would talk about this with people. I'm like, okay, cool. How do you get people to like think about it differently? And he goes, well, what I say is, do you remember the Bulls back in the 90s? I'm like, yeah, of course. And he goes, you have Jordan, you have Pippen, and you have like Bill Cartwright, and they're like, I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Like I know these people. Tell me the rest of the story. Horace Grant, like the whole team's magnificent. And he goes, are you ever going to be able to beat any one of those people one-on-one in a basketball game? No. Hold on. If you get really mad if you get furious and like it's all on the line, there's a gun to your head, could you beat Horace Grant in a 1-to-1 basketball game? Absolutely not. Okay, cool. I'm Scottie Pippen. I'm not Michael Jordan. I'm not the best there ever was, but I'm better than Horace Grant. I'm Scottie Pippen. And what do I have to tell you to make you believe there's no possible way you're going to beat me? Like, that is practiced. That is why you see these Marines and they'll come home and they have such confidence because it has been beaten into them. They've been trained. They've been trained to a place of readiness that most people never really conceptualize or understand, right? And it's there in martial arts. It's there in like high levels of sports. It's there in high levels of everything. And then you have people who want to wing it, just show up because they're normally comfortable and pretty good at it and stuff like that. Cool. That's, name a basketball player who was supposed to be huge and then wasn't when they hit the pros. That's winging it, my opinion.
Oh yeah, because there's enough of that natural ability, and they're good at a lower
Absolutely.
level and all of that. And I think sales is one of those things too. And there's many, but sales is a big one where you can get some results. You can stumble into some results if you just do it, enough time or accidentally or happen to walk in the right door.
Yeah.
And it's just enough to keep you from thinking you need that practice and and all of that until you shift to, okay, I want to be amazing at this. What do I need to do? Until you get to that intention, and now you're going to learn and practice and apply what you learn and apply and get feedback and try again and try again.
The best sellers are not waiting until like the last week of the month or the last week of the quarter to scramble up a bunch of meetings. You've already lost the battle by that point because you're not going to be in a place to have good calls because you're in a scarcity mindset. You're going to be focused on just trying to get your own needs met. And these are calls you should have been having weeks ago, but you weren't consistent with your initial actions, the activities that lead to success. You just want the success on the other end of it. That's problematic. This is why process works so well for selling and why so many people don't really want to do it, because it means being a little bit more consistent, having a little bit of oversight, having a little bit of activity count, having a little bit of, not being the rainmaker who brings in that last deal like right under the gun and everything is okay. Like, that's fundamentally a problem, right? Business runs on forecasts. So if you can't say, hey, we're going to hit 40 and then hit 40, you have much bigger problems to go fix than your marketing or positioning, in my personal opinion, because the business that doesn't forecast well doesn't stay around.
Well, yeah, and if you take it, and I have to play these mind games, so maybe it helps other people too. But when it comes to the consistent action and all of that, but if you take this reframe of taking it away from like, okay, I've got to do this every day, this thing and that thing, and instead go take it for what the empowering aspect of it that it is, of like, I know I can reach out to this many people. I know I can have X amount of phone calls. I know I can control the response. I can get better and better and having better conversations that increase the odds of that response being yes or being whatever. Mm-hmm. But if you can take that and fully embrace that fact, it does just like, oh, well, then every day, you feel like, oh, I did something, rather than, well, I got 2 yeses today, or I made 2 sales. I don't know how they happen. Hope it happens again tomorrow. That's such a better place to be.
Man, I don't know how people function with that line of thinking anymore. Like, last week was Thanksgiving, just to kind of pull the curtain back. I don't know when this is going to come out. And so I didn't work a lot, for me. But I was talking with a friend of mine on Wednesday, and he's like, oh, he's my accountability buddy. And we hadn't caught up in a while. And so he goes, okay, are you working this week? I said, no, not really. And he goes, okay, cool. You want to have lunch? And I'm like, well, I can meet between, these times. And he goes, dude, I thought you were off this week. And I'm like, well, I had to do a little bit, right? Because a little bit consisted of, a paid consulting call, a couple of networking calls, and 100 outreach on LinkedIn, because those are my KPIs, right? And if I do those things every week, I never have to worry about lack of meetings, lack of qualified meetings, lack of opportunities, or anything else. So I was talking about this with Jake, my co-host, who is the guy who introduced us, or who introduced us originally, and was talking about having 4 days off: Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It was harder for me to want to come get back in the saddle today than if I had just done a little bit on Wednesday, a little bit on Thursday, and a little bit on Friday, right? So another Kung Fu metaphor, my teacher would always talk about chopping wood and carrying water, right? And students hate this. They see it as grunt work, but masters love it because it's just actions for the sake of actions. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to overwhelm yourself with it. You're just literally carrying some water and chopping some wood, right? And when I think about sales, it's only hard because we make it hard. We only focus on, oh my God, I'm being such an interruption to this person's day, because you're not confident that what you are actually able to do is transform them into a place that they need to be. That's why you're resistant, right? So, start with the people, talk to the people, figure out what they're really dealing with. Don't surround yourself with a bunch of cronies who are going to tell you nice things, but actually don't sit in this group of people that you're trying to have conversations with. And then be very thoughtful as you're going through those things. Am I really hearing what they're saying? Am I listening to respond, or am I listening to understand? Most salespeople are just listening so that way they can be primed to ask their next question. And they're going to miss really great nuance in the conversation. Last year was really good, but the third quarter was really, really rough. Oh, interesting. What happened in that third quarter? That's the thing they want to talk about, as opposed to just like, well, what are your plans for next year? I get that you want to talk about that and it's important, but they meaningfully added something to the conversation. They want you to ask about it. And if we're listening and being a human, we would ask about it. Because when my buddy comes up and he's struggling with something inside of his business and not someone I coach, okay, what are you struggling? Well, things are going pretty good, but I'm struggling with this thing. Oh, why that thing? Start there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and don't be afraid to dig, right? And ask permission, right? And be all of that, for folks who need it. Be that very much like, I know we just met, but when you I saw your face when you mentioned this. Do you mind if I ask just a little bit more about that? And when you can dig into that, I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's the human aspect of this whole thing. To me, the fun part, right? Like, but it's, even as much as I like that, it's still that purposefulness. It's that reminding myself to look for those things and listen for those things. But those little subtleties can make all the difference in the world.
Agreed. Like, it seems odd that we're both just like kind of sitting here talking about we need to listen better. But man, if people listen better, like, sales conversations would be fundamentally different, right? It's such a it's a thing that we take for granted. Well, I heard you, so it's my turn to speak. Cool. You can take a second. You don't have to be Johnny on the spot, right? How much does it cost? Well, it costs this. Well, how much does it cost? Great question. Do you really think we're at a place to where we could talk about some opportunities to improve your situation? Because I'm still a little bit fuzzy. That's okay. Right? What do you really need help with? Don't ask me how much it costs until you tell me that this is something you really need. Why would you even care how much it costs until you've made a decision? Let's talk a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit deeper. Let's really get into the weeds of this stuff. So important, man.
I know. And that's where practice comes in, right? Because if this is the first time you've done it and it's, November 29th and make this sale and somebody asks how much it is, it's just like, all I can think about is, well, hopefully I'll tell them how much it is and hopefully they'll buy right now, because it sounds like they're interested and they want to buy.
Yep.
And not being afraid of that silence.
You have all these people who don't want to do the effort of getting their own meetings, so they're going to hire someone else to get their own meetings. And that goes wrong more often than it goes right. I see it all the time because the talking points get muddled, the value gets muddled, and then there's this expectation that the other person is setting the appointment is setting the right kind of appointments, even though that's never been documented or clarified for either person. So every time you get a no, it's that person's fault. No, what an absurd way to think through the process and equation, So yeah, there's a lot of room for sales to change inside of businesses in the B2B segment. Like SaaS has got its own issues, agencies have their own issues, freelancers have their own issues. Eventually, Sherpa will be built out to kind of have like range to be able to help all those people in all those areas I just talked about from like a high level, but also like a tactical, deeper level, right? Because I do think that with Sherpa and the Big Seven and a couple of the other frameworks that I talk about, you can sell anything, but some people have goals and deadlines, and they need to get to those milestones faster. So that's one of the things we want to build out in the future.
I love that. Do you want to give us a quick rundown on a couple of those other frameworks? I mean, I know there's a ton there, but just like to give people an overview and an idea of what those are.
So the Big Seven is essentially a play I heard at a sales conference a couple of years ago. This guy got on stage and said that most deals don't close due to only 7 reasons. And I was like, because at that time I was really focused on building CRMs, and it was just a side hustle. I hadn't decided to do it full time yet, but I built a lot of CRMs for people at that stage. And I was like, maybe there's something to this. And because I built them all, I was able to go in there and look at the data. Lo and behold, it was true. Right now, every business has got some nuance to it, which is why you really need to understand your market and your vertical. But if you're thinking proactively about the things that normally shut down deals, and you ask questions early in discovery about these things, you're going to have better outcomes, right? Because the biggest one is talking about money, right? Money is kind of a taboo subject. People don't like to talk about it. We're brought up and raised not to talk about it. My parents told me, don't talk to strangers, don't talk about money. If I follow those instructions, I will never be successful as a salesperson or entrepreneur, right? I've got to talk about these things. So what happens is salespeople don't talk about money, don't talk about money, don't talk about money, and they're so excited to send a proposal. Why are you excited to send a proposal when you have not even had a conversation about what this thing is going to cost? Are you just hoping that they've got this money set aside? Like, hope is not a sales strategy. Talk about money. Like, hey, different people fall into different buckets whenever it comes to working with us. Some people are 3,000 to 5,000, some people are 7,000 to 10,000, and some people with some really big goals are like 15 to 20. Which one of those buckets would make the most sense for where you are right now? And have a conversation about it. Don't send a proposal until you talk about money. Why? Right? Doesn't make any sense. But when you can have these kind of proactive conversations, looking for these stumbling blocks, looking for the reasons that people say no early, you don't waste time. You don't spend 6 months with someone and then they tell you no. Right? You might spend a week with someone and then they tell you no. That's a win, because then you have more time to go spend with the other people who you might have some opportunity with. But this whole idea, and this is my biggest pet peeve, salespeople and marketers, right, especially in the consulting realm, love to just talk about how like every meeting has value. Meetings have value, but as you get busier, your qualifying for how you spend your time also has to become deeper. Right? If you have 40 hours and nothing to do, take any meeting you can possibly get. But if you're busy, you need to put some qualifiers on who you're spending time with. And my favorite exercise is to ask people, well, you should want a relationship with everybody. Great. You have one phone line and it rings and one person has one deal and the other person has 5 deals. Who do you answer the phone for? Well, the person with 5 deals. So not every meeting has got the same amount of value to it. That one little qualifier fundamentally changes the whole equation. So we can't go around with this scarcity mindset of like every meeting I need, because like, no, sometimes it just doesn't make sense. And that's where you really have to trust your like marketing and sales team as well. Are they doing their jobs with intention? Or are they just taking meetings because you have a meeting KPI? Everyone must have 7 meetings this week. Great. What's the quality level of those metrics?
Yeah. That's that's so key. And you can play with that. You can have those goals in place of those metrics. So you got to have 7 meetings a week, but then it's on you to make sure those are 7 quality meetings, and you're not just ticking a box there.
Yep. And from a sales process perspective, that could all be outlined, right? Because which salesperson do you want on your team, right? Do you want a salesperson who's going to go set 7 meetings, or do you want a salesperson who understands your target market, is ability to kind of target that from the outside of it, so that way they're saving time using LinkedIn or some of these other tools. So they really kind of zeroed in on who you guys can help the most, and they're setting probably 5 meetings versus 7 with those highly qualified people. Like, which one do you want inside of your business? Everybody wants the second one.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I've never met someone who's like, well, I want unqualified meetings. No, you don't. You think you want them now because you're not busy, but the minute you get busy, that's going to shift. So start thinking with that now. What would a good meeting be worth my time? What do they need to be thinking about, going through, size, location? What are they not dealing with? Sometimes it's easier in our work to start with the stuff that shouldn't get a meeting, right? Because if you start with absolute no, it's a little bit easier to find absolute yes. But sometimes when you're starting with yes, everyone is just like, oh, I want everything. You really, really don't, right? Like, what would mean that they need you but aren't a good fit for you? It's one of my favorite questions to like ask clients, because they're like, well, if they need me, then no, that's not how this works. There's something different about you that makes you a standout provider to the client you serve. And if you don't know what that is, sales and marketing are going to be remarkably inconsistent for you.
Oh yeah. So we're going through that big 7. Is that 7?
Yeah. Yes. So the big 7, is really just questions we often hear at the end of proposals, at the end of like selling processes, that we can ask about earlier on. The first one is, I'm not sure why I need this. Okay. You're gonna run into this a lot. This is about understanding the motivations, the pains, the nuances, the gaps. However you frame that internally, you really need to understand what they need to move. Don't just assume that because you're new and improved or 42% more than your provider, that's going to make them move. If they don't tell you that, you're going to have to sell them on it. So hear it from them. Ask those questions. Second one is budget. I can't afford this. This isn't in the budget. This isn't in the budget right now. Cool. Talk about money with people. Save yourself months of time, depending upon your selling cycle, and just have that uncomfortable conversation. The next one is, so these are all kind of very similar, but different in how they show up. One is you have an internal champion, right? So the internal champion loves you, but the other people aren't bought into you yet. Great, that's a problem. You need to be multi-threading. You need to have some other connection points inside of that organization, because if that person leaves, then you got nobody. Then it's a cold prospect again. That's a nightmare. Next one is we're going to go with a competitor. Ask about who else they're talking to. It is so easy to fill out 15 contact forms for any business need under the planet. Why would you not assume that they're not talking to someone else? It doesn't behoove us. So ask those questions. Next one is other decision makers, right? Well, I got to go take this to my CEO, to my CMO, my CFO. You missed the question there. Who else inside of your organization is normally part of these discussions? And should they be part of these early stage discussions, or do they normally get involved later on? You no longer have to deal with pitching to someone who's not ready to give you a yes or a no. And then two more. One is, now's not the right time, right? Sometimes, especially if you're selling enterprise deals, they're looking at the next budget. They're not thinking about right now. So if you're not really on the same page with them, okay, when are you looking to implement? When are you looking to make a change? What does that need to look like? And then can we work backwards from that launch date to make sure that we're on the same page about the timeline? You don't ever have to guess, and you always have good follow-up points, right? And the last one is just loss to focus, right? These little devices pull so much of our focus in so many different directions, and then we have emails and social media and everything else, and deadlines and goals, and like, salespeople are really good about taking advantage of a great conversation to get the most of it that they can. Marketers don't do that, in my opinion. They're much more inclined to like, well, let's just put them in the nurturing sequence. It's going to be okay because it's just a timing issue. And so there's a skill set gap here between marketers and salespeople. So you should be very thoughtful about what other priorities are on their page, what else is taking up time and attention, what might mean that now's not the right time, especially if you're doing like a big like SaaS software implementation. You're going to need buy-in from the team, probably multiple teams, probably multiple stakeholders, and you have buy-in from one person and you think you have a deal? No, that's not how this works. So Those are the big seven. So if you're thinking about those proactive areas, now every business is what we call these wild cards. Wild cards are like individual to the business itself. If you're the small player and you're losing out to big players, you need to question about that in a way that is creative and thoughtful and intentional. But the big seven are universal. I've never coached someone who is not dealing with those big seven and can be helped by proactively looking for those holes and gaps very early on in their discovery, as opposed to just hoping it's going to be okay and then, getting their heart broken at the end of the process.
Wow. Oh, no, I love that. Again, have up on the wall as just back and forth,
literally
back and forth. Yeah.
Like, this is my stuff. I talk about it constantly. Sales Practice Lab, we take one of these big seven elements, or we'll take something from Sherpa and I talk about it, and then we practice it in a rep-driven format. I still have the big seven on a Post-it note attached to my page or attached to my monitor here to make sure that I don't skip it. Like, this is all I do all day, and I still don't put myself in situations to where I can underperform. My note is always on. All my calls are here. I can see it right here. I have this other thing here that I use for my personality and understanding how people want to communicate. But this stuff has to be in front of you, and you have to be well practiced, or else you're not going to rise to the occasion.
I love it. John, thank you so much for being back on continuation here with this.
Of course, man. Did we do a better job this time?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I think so. I love going deep on this stuff and really talking through all this. It's fun and exciting, but it's so useful. It's so tangible. And I hope that we sort of broadened that perspective on selling for a lot of folks, which I think, your book does. Anytime you speak and really digging into this and allowing people to just take in the fact that they can go beyond the shtick out there that's around selling and all of that, and really, and not only that they can, but they should, and they're going to get better long-term results overall by doing so. So I really appreciate that. Who should reach out to you, and how do they do so?
So normally the people that I'm having the best outcomes with are people who are in business, but they don't like the sales side of the business. They got into it because they're creative. They really like the work that they do. They don't like the sales aspect of it, and they're tired of looking at sales material thinking that it's going to force them to be someone else. So freelancers, branders, marketing agency people who are just starting out, please reach out. We've got some amazing outcomes for people in that space, and you don't have to fundamentally change who you are. And then if you have a sales team that is not getting enough of the fundamental practice, we have practice space twice a week over Zoom. They can get those practice reps in and be really prepared for those calls.
Awesome. And where should they reach out? Just Google you?
Yes. At this stage, if you Google John Small Mountain, I show up, which is pretty cool at this stage. So if you Google that, you'll find me, you'll find Adapted Growth. You can take a look at all of our content on all the platforms and see if it's worth a conversation. If so, I look forward to talking to you.
Awesome, man. This has been a blast.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I love getting in here and making sure that it's what the people need. So thank you for the opportunity.
Certainly. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of this show. If you want help creating authority-building video content or even a client-generating show of your own, go to MediaLeadsCo.com and let's connect. I'll talk to you soon on the next Strategy in Action.